This weekend was Mother's Day, and we were able to go home and celebrate the ladies who shaped us and raised us, our moms. And this video is going to be a little different than what we normally do, but we thought it was really worth sharing, and we hope that you enjoy it.
So on Sunday, my dad invited me to go up on stage and join him, and we talked about my adoption story. It was really special. We also had some time to honor my mom, which was my favorite part. But in the video, it kind of starts with my dad talking some about the story of Moses and his mom and her bold faith. And then we kind of move into my story, my adoptive parents, my birth parents, and just God's grace and hand through all that. We really hope this encourages you, so I hope you'll take a few minutes and watch it.
We live in a confusing world, don't we? I mean, up is down, down is up, right is wrong, wrong is right, incivility over civility, violence over peace, hate over love. Jesus sidelined, or as C.S. Lewis said, Jesus Christ is now in the dock. So, here's the question. Is God still sovereign? Is God still in control? I want to give a backstory to what Sam just read. Then I want to summarize what he read, and then I want to apply it. Okay? So here we go. In this story, the Hebrew people are in desperate situations. They're in trouble. They're in Egypt. A new Pharaoh is on the throne. You'll remember that when Joseph was in Egypt, he was the talk of the town, of the city, of the nation. Joseph has long been dead. A new Pharaoh is on the scene. And this Pharaoh does not remember Joseph. Oh, how we so easily forget what people do for us. But you see, this Pharaoh is scared because the Hebrew people are multiplying exponentially. He sees it as a threat. So he says, here's what I need to do. So he calls the Hebrew midwives into his presence and he says, I want you to go when you hear of a birth, and if it's a baby boy, I want you to abort the baby boy. Abort the baby boy. The midwives, full of God, refused to do that, and the text says, and God blessed them. Then Pharaoh, irate, says, I'll send an edict throughout the land that if all people hear of a baby boy being born, they are to kill that child by throwing him into the Nile River, where their crocodiles will consume that child instantaneously. Now, an unnamed couple enters the story. An unnamed couple, they get married, and later they have a baby boy. We later learned their names. Amram is the daddy, and Jochebed is the mother. Now, when Jochebed gives birth to a baby boy, how did she respond? Fear? Joy? A mixture of both? Like any mother, she sees something special in her child. But you see, there's a bounty on her child's head. Jochebed may not fear the king's edict, but she wanted to see her child live. So she tirelessly tries to hide him. But the world is closing in on her because her son is getting louder and louder. I imagine what a physical and emotional turmoil that took on her heart, mind, and soul. Did she ever sense that God was absent from her midst? Finally, she prepares a papyrus basket, places tar and pitch so it'll stay afloat, and she places that little ark in the Nile River amongst the reeds. Is this a calculated move? Or is it an act of desperation? We simply don't know. But even if it's a calculated move, she doesn't know how Pharaoh's daughter will respond when she sees that child. Will she say, bring him to me? or will she say, kill him? The princess comes down. She eyes the basket. She sends her female slave after it. And when Pharaoh's daughter opens the basket, she sees the newborn child, and she hears him cry. A newborn baby's cry melts her heart. Miriam, the baby's older biological sister, had been standing at a distance, and she saw all of this take place, and she comes out of the shadows and confronts Pharaoh's daughter, saying, do you need one of our women to nurse this child? The princess agrees, so Miriam brings her mother to the princess, and the princess says to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you. Don't tell me that God's not involved. His mother takes her newborn and nurses him, but she does far more. More importantly, she also nurtures him. The time is short. She wastes no time whatsoever. In her arms, he hears his story, his heritage, stories about his God. She was imparting something to him that was not temporal but eternal. And then at a later date, and we don't know how long, she takes her child to Pharaoh's daughter. And that woman becomes an adopted mom. The Egyptian princess, she even names him. She says, Moses, because I drew him out of the water. When Jochebed, his mother, his biological mother, released her newborn son, her son to the Pharaoh's princess, the biological mother, was there a large part of her heart she let go away? Did she ever wonder if Moses would feel abandoned by her? Was there a hole in her heart and soul? And what about Moses? Did he ever wonder why his mother did this? Did he understand? Would he ever understand? You see, in the Bible, there's this theological concept called the Providence of God. It's a term that says God has a plan and purpose for each one of us, and He's working it out in our lives even when we cannot see it at any given moment. You see, I believe that this story oozes with God's providence. God's name may not appear in these verses, but the imprint of His guiding hand is all upon it. You see, this story is messy, but so is yours. Yet in this story, God is working out a terrible situation and preparing the most likely of persons, Moses, to be the liberator of His people. So here's the question. How does this apply to us? So I want to invite Joshua Adams to join me on the platform. We will be tag teaming this sermon. He's our son. And this is a dream come true for me. You see, we get to deliver a sermon together before a congregation that we love on Mother's Day. Joshua and Alexa have been married now for 2 years. His beautiful wife is a teacher in the Fort Mill School District. And Joshua is a YouTube strategist at Elevation Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Joshua, one day, if God blesses you, and when He does with a child, you'll understand what's going on in your mom and heart, soul right now, to be up here with you and know these people have played such a pivotal part in your spiritual formation. So go ahead and say a word of welcome, Joshua.
Wow. Thank you. I can't look at Mom right now, but I definitely think you have no idea what I'm doing up here. I told Dad, you might be as surprised as when I dented your car the first time I took it out. But it's good to be here, and happy Mother's Day.
So Joshua, what do you think of this story? I mean, there's so many themes germane to your story.
Yeah. Well, at first, I wasn't too eager to get up here. I'll admit it. The story of Moses, I've heard it so many times. I heard it growing up here, and, I knew the gist of it. He led the people out of Egypt. He was a baby in the river. But I think it was, for me, I didn't connect with it at first. It seemed irrelevant, outdated. But then I dug in. And after you called, I started to really see some links. And I think even for all of us, like for one, we all have mothers. Now, whether they were good, bad, or indifferent, we all have one. Some of us, that's the only reason we're here, and some of us carry great pain and trauma from those situations. But we're all a product of our mothers. And I think everyone here, we all have a mother, a mentor, someone who's spoken into us, who shaped us. So I feel completely unqualified to be up here. We have two men talking on Mother's Day. So seems a little backwards, but we are two products of praying mothers and mentors who believed in us.
So, Joshua, as we have talked this week about Moses and Jochebed, we've seen links between this story and your adoption story.
Yeah.
Could you talk about this?
Yeah. Well, as most of you probably know, I'm adopted. If you're a first-time guest, I'll forgive you. Don't expect you to know that. But if you've been here a few times, you may need to pay a little more attention to the sermons, because it tends to be a theme that comes up a good bit. So rewind a year. This time last year, we met my birth parents. And what started on Ancestry.com led to texts, calls, emails, Zoom calls, and finally meeting them in person. And it's been thrilling, but also a bit of a roller coaster, I think, for our family. And over the course of this past year, I've been trying to come to terms with this story, with my story. And because mine was a closed adoption, we really didn't know much. We knew a bit, but the story that I'd kind of heard my whole life, it's not that it was untrue, it was just incomplete. And we didn't know many of the details. So now we know. I was born to a 16-year-old birth mother, high school student, also named Donna. Talk about God. Unplanned, unexpected. I was even unknown to my birth mother's parents until her water broke. Don't ask me about that. But 16-year-olds, they're supposed to be thinking about who to go to prom with, not what to do with their child. And Donna, my birth mother, she was overwhelmed, she was confused. I was not her plan. When Donna and my birth father, Tripp, when they found out about me, there was really only one viable, no pun intended, thing to do, and that was abortion. But you see, Donna was 16. So they needed a fake ID and money for an abortion. So Tripp, my birth father, he went out and sold his Z28 Camaro, even had red and black leather seats. He sold that to raise money for the procedure. And all of this was going according to plan until Donna went to her church, a place just like this. It happened that one night there was a girl speaking who had undergone exactly what Donna was about to do. And in that moment, her heart changed. She just couldn't do it. Well, Tripp, he'd already sold the car, so he used the money to buy a 12-string guitar. So at least he put it to good use. But so after this first attempt was thwarted, then later, when Donna's mentors found out about me, they pushed her even to consider a late-term abortion. And they really reminded her of how having a baby would change the course of her life. This wasn't what she wanted. And so then, with their guidance and their support, they checked with the health departments in every single U.S. state, only finding out that they were days late for such a procedure across the board. Meanwhile, they didn't know that in Walhalla, South Carolina, my parents, right here, were on their knees praying, calling out to God. And when they thought that every door had closed to an adoption. They went out and they bought a rocking chair in faith. They really believed that God could do it. They believed that God had a baby for them. And so it's when I think about their boldness and their faith that I thought about Moses' mom, Jochebed. She kept Moses for 3 months from the Egyptian authorities. You know, she had to fear every single day what would happen. She was probably jumping at every sound, just terrified at even the thought of the Egyptian officials finding out. Her baby should have been killed. And eventually, when she couldn't conceal him any longer, she put tar and pitch on a basket, attempt to waterproof it, and she handed off her baby to the very river where he was supposed to be killed. She had to trust God. For her, there was no plan B.
Joshua, you don't know, when we met your birth parents, your birth mother, and there were 2 things I wanted to tell her. Number one, to thank her for going full term. You see, abortion's not political for me. It's life. And I also told her, I said, I want you to meet the woman that knows every aspect of your biological child. And I pointed to Donna, your mom. So, you know, they did consider keeping you. But then in that brave decision, in concert with their pastor, in connection with her parents, they made the decision to release you to adoption, and we became your parents, a day that transformed our life. Yeah. So talk for a moment about the impact of your mom.
So I was thinking about this, and I wrote down a few different names we call you. Different names for my mom. So we have standard mom, mother, the mother, madre, my dad's favorite, Madonna, the one that's commonly used when yelling, ma, you know, we kind of yell that one occasionally across the house, or mama. And I think it's really fitting of the many different hats she wears. I mean, seriously, like bookkeeper, chief operating officer, photographer, teacher. Y'all know I only passed school because of her. I mean, come on. Fundraising coordinator. If I sold you Sally Foster wrapping paper, I would like to formally apologize. But no, my mom made so much possible. Event planner, Uber driver, professional conflict de-escalator. That's just to name a few. So I did some research, and on salary.com, they estimate that if the average mother was paid fairly for the diverse task that she's responsible for and the long hours she works, she'd be making a median salary of $184,000. And I can tell you, with everything she did and does, she'd be making way more than that. So she put her career on the side to focus on raising me. And if I can say so myself, considering just a little bit of what I put you through, being a mother is a high calling. It really is. And I know I'm only here today because of her commitment. And I see, even today, I see your fingerprints all over me. Your heart for others, and awareness of others, attention to detail and organization, love for pictures. I think you only took about 50,000 of me. So. But I've always known that someone loved me and that someone believed in me. And when I think of you, Mom, I also think of moments. There's so many. Like all through school, we'd stand in the living room and jump around to celebrate an accomplishment, a grade, something. You'd sit there as I would roll around in the floor and call out things to me so I could study. I mean, thank you, seriously. You'd pick me up from school, hear all about my day, every day. I even remember the day that you asked me about the girl I had a crush on, and it was Alexa Bagwell, my wife now. But we always were able to talk, and we still are. And even as a kid, I remember you'd sit by my bed, and you'd sing, "God is so good," and touch my nose. So there's so many moments. Even, I think some of you even might remember this moment. When we first moved here.
Oh, yeah.
You were new here. I, during worship, climbed under that table. And you had to get me out and deal with me. So, lots of moments. I have so many memories, but I think there's a story from this week that I think illustrates it. So please forgive me for sharing this. It's just too good not to share. She's looking at me like, oh God, what are you about to say? But so I'll give you a little setup. I love making videos. I share them on YouTube. And to like the videos, you need a Google account. To engage with the videos in any way, you need a Google account. Okay, so that's the backstory. So this week, Alexa and I, we get some text from my mom, and I'm just going to read you one of the messages, and then we'll talk about it. Here it is. Don't know if there is an easier way to be able to vote, but I don't use Goggle enough to remember my username and password. So I had just watched, but my vote didn't count on the time I watched without signing in to Goggle first. You know, I hear that, and I can just feel the passion in it. I mean, she's really trying. She really is. And yes, she means Google, not Goggle, or like, not vote. And granted, she knows what Google is. She told me she misspelled it. Okay, but even if she didn't, she'd figure it out for me. I think if she had to, you would fly to Silicon Valley. I really think so. If you had to go figure out what this was about, you would really do anything to support us, to connect with us. And that means so much. But I promise, once we get out of here, Mom, we can work on your Goggle account, okay? We'll see if we can figure that one out. So, time and again, honestly, whether I was in a hospital bed or at a milestone, at a graduation or celebrating something, she was there. You were there. I remember you were there when I got my one and only referral in 6th grade. That pink slip of paper brought to you. You were also there when I studied abroad and you were celebrating with me, all these different things. So you've given so much of your time, your money, your effort, your energy, years of your life to me. And I think as a mom, there's no retirement, and a lot of times there's not a whole lot of acknowledgement either. And it can even be perceived as a second-rate calling, but that's a myth. I wasn't easy. And I bet a bunch of you weren't easy either. So seriously, let's say thank you, Mom.
Well, Josh, we've always said that you were our chosen son. I remember when we saw you in the neonatal intensive care unit, before we even laid hands on you, we said, son, you're adopted.
Yeah.
You're chosen. And it reminds me of that Ephesians passage. And you don't have to be chosen and be an adopted son to understand the providence of God. So how do you see this idea, this reality of providence working out in this text?
Yeah. I love the definition I saw recently of providence. It's the weaving of natural events together for a supernatural purpose. And I really like that.
I like that.
Your children, they aren't just your kids. They're God's. They are in his hands. You know, Moses' sister, she spoke up to Pharaoh's daughter to find a Hebrew woman to nurse baby Moses. She got Moses' mom, Jochebed, to see what had happened to her baby. She got to see, Moses' mom got to see her baby alive, knowing that he wouldn't be killed. And I think we look at that, and it's easy to step back and say, wow, that was God. Look at God. Can he do it? And we can throw all these churchy things at it, and they aren't wrong. There's nothing inherently bad about that, but they might not capture the full story. We don't always see our answered prayer in a year or a decade, or sometimes even a lifetime. And the story in Exodus, the part that we don't see is it doesn't include the sleepless nights where Jochebed wondered if she'd made the right decision. It doesn't include the pain of handing her son back to Pharaoh's daughter and watching him grow up in another home. It doesn't talk about her having to come to terms with the fact that she couldn't give Moses what Pharaoh's family could. She was a slave. And there's a part about my story, too, that I haven't told you. My birth mother, she faced months, years of depression after she handed me over. She ached. But she went on. She went to college, and when she got to college and a friend talked about their resentment toward their birth parents, she just knew that I would feel the same way. I'd hate her. I'd resent her. And so she carried this guilt over her decision. And for years, she prayed I'd find a wife. She prayed I'd be happy. She prayed I didn't live with this deep anger to her. But she really didn't know. But God wasn't done. And he's not done with you either. Last year, in a moment that honestly can only be from God, I was able to look at my birth mother in the eye and say, you made the right decision. I've always said it, and I still believe it, that our bond is deeper than blood. And I'll never forget when we're sitting at that table, and Donna, my birth mother, looked at Donna, my mom, and she said, you were meant to be his mom. I was the vessel to get him here. Whew. As a 16-year-old, she could only take me so far. She couldn't give me the life my parents have. And Jochebed was the same way. She was a repressed Hebrew. She was a slave. And Moses was raised in Pharaoh's house. Now, I'm not saying I was raised as royalty, but I think it's pretty close. So, I mean, no, I've been really blessed. And I think it's such a good reminder to know that we serve a God that isn't confined by your limitations.
Yes. Yes.
Even in your limitations, your shortcomings, your mistakes, your failures, God's still working. That's Providence.
So, Joshua, what would you say to the mothers who've given up their children for adoption or even went through abortion? And what would you say to them?
I don't think I can speak to every situation, and I really wouldn't try to. But I know God isn't surprised by your mess, and he's not surprised by mine either. I read this week, he loves you and he loves me just as much in our darkest moments as he does in our best moments. And I really believe you're not a mistake. I'm not a mistake. Yes. You mentioned Ephesians. I have Ephesians 1, 4 through 6 right here. For he chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with his pleasure and will, to the praise of his glorious grace, which he has freely given us. You are chosen. You are not beyond redemption. I think we read this and we're reminded there's grace that covers you and covers me.
Yes.
And I got a word of comfort for the moms out there too. I think if you're a mom, you have an incredible responsibility. But you're not the end-all, be-all. You can't carry the weight of the world. One more time. You can't carry the weight of the world. And so we see this like in the story, and even today, we see this beautiful partnership between God and moms. Moses' mom, Jochebed, she realized that she wasn't going to be able to raise Moses. Israelite boys were destined to be killed in Egypt, but she handed off her baby in faith. And I think all moms have experienced a similar handoff of sorts. I mean, at 3 months old, you're feeding or nursing your child. But at 37, I hope they can take care of themselves. They got to learn how to cook. They got to learn how to clean. And that's the handoff. I mean, Alexa and I, we got married in 2020, and we had this sweet celebration. But my mom didn't come on my honeymoon. I promise she didn't. My mother-in-law, who I love, she didn't come either. They loved us. They cared for us. They'd done so much. But there comes a point when you got to step back. And you got to say, hey, God, I trust you to do the rest. And I love Paul's writing in Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. All things. Say that with me. All things. God guided Moses' mom, Jochebed, the flow of the Nile River, Moses' cry at just the right time, and the heart of Pharaoh's daughter for his plan. He sent a mentor to step in at just the right time. all things. I wasn't planned. My birth father sold his car to pay for an abortion. But Donna walked into her church and heard a different story. Her mentors even pushed her to have a late-term abortion. But God sent two parents who prayed, who longed to have a child. My birth parents were the DNA. They got me here. They may not have planned for me, but God did. All things. And Paul didn't write that things work together for my good or what I want, but for good. I think it's a good reminder to think that God's goodness is far superior to my wishes and to our wishes. And so today, don't underestimate the hand of God in your life. Moms, you can't do it all. There are times you felt like you've really blown it. You've hurt people. You've made mistakes. And that's okay. Welcome to Life 101. Easy for you to say, Joshua. Look at your story. Everything's so beautiful. I just tied this beautiful bow around it. But trust me, it's not all perfect. It's really not. I've struggled a lot. We struggle a lot. I've struggled with anxiety, with relationships, with myself. The list goes on. But it's not just about beating the hard things. I think it's really about trusting God in the middle of the daily battle. I think there are some moms today that have only made it this far by partnering with God, by trusting God. And some of us are only here because of that. So remember, even if you feel like you aren't supposed to be here, keep in mind, God knew what he was doing. You're not a mistake. And he's not finished yet.
So Joshua, as we wrap this up, give us a challenge. Give us a challenge.
So, when thinking about Moses, he was a slave, should have been killed, but he did a lot. And we hear so much about him. He led the Israelites out of Egypt. He went up on Mount Sinai where God gave him the 10 Commandments. And so I want to go back to the 10 Commandments just for one moment, Exodus 20. And there's only one commandment that comes with a promise. So if you look in Exodus 20, fifth one, it says, honor your father and mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Honor your father and mother so that you may live long. Whether you like it or not, God used them to make you. Honor them. It's what we are commanded to do. I think today, on this day, some simple practical steps. Remember your mom. Call your mom. Hug your mom. Tell her how thankful you are for her. If you feel like you're too busy, you can send me your calendar even. I'll take a look. You aren't too busy. When's the last time you thanked your mom for just putting up with you? I think if you're anything like me, you can be a little difficult sometimes. I know I can. She put up with you. She did so much. She prayed for you. Is she perfect? No. But you're not either. I'm not either. And I think anybody who's lost a mom can tell you how much they wish they could just have one more conversation. Remind your mom how needed she is, even if you don't physically live with her anymore. We all need some motherly prayer, insight, guidance, wisdom. The USDA estimates it can cost just about $235,000 on average to raise a child to the age of 18 in the U.S. If it weren't for you and me, you know how much money your parents could have? They could have spent that on anything, honestly, anything else. But there's some of you, maybe you didn't have a strong mom. You carry pain and hurt from that relationship. And I think it's not too late to make it right. Yes. You can't hold on to resentment forever. And take some time today to thank God for the mentors he put in your life, the people who stepped in and filled in the gap. Maybe to you think about today, it's not Mother's Day to you. Maybe it's Mentors Day. Go thank somebody who poured into you. We're here, all of us, because of the power of praying moms, mentors, people who invested in us. I know there are plenty of things that should have taken me out, should have taken you out. You shouldn't be here today. I shouldn't be here today, but we are. It's not a mistake. And many of us only are because of the mothers and women who have poured into us and prayed and stayed committed to us. Moses was born to a slave, and we're still talking about him today. There's no telling what God can do with you.
What's your story? It's when we look back and we see what God has been up to. Through the good times and the challenging times. That we can really get a glimpse of the hand of God in our life. This may be the most exciting time in your life right now. Or it may be so dark that you don't want anyone to know what you're thinking about doing. Here is a place of hope. And here is a time, right now, that each one of us here can make our peace with God, can make a decision before God in the presence of these who love us that will forever shape and transform our life. It was College Street Baptist Church who prayed this young man into our arms. And it was a church in North Augusta that had the guts to stand up and speak the truth about a deep issue. The reason he's not a statistic, he's our son. So I want to invite you as families to come to this altar and rededicate your life today. I want to invite you to come and take my hand and let's talk and let's pray together. We're in a topsy-turvy world and we need to be firmly rooted in the gospel of Jesus Christ, firmly embracing Jesus Christ. No other purpose, no idol usurping the role of God. Can we agree to that today? We come now to our hymn of invitation. Our hymn of invitation is the gift of love. The lyrics will be on the screen. You can take your hymnal and sing. But I want to challenge you to get up and come forward and respond. It may be salvation, rededication, or family dedication, but let's get on the move for God right now. Let's stand and let's sing.